Yay!
Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah, I'm gonna see if I can mess things up a little bit more and share my screen here. Let's see if this is gonna work. Let me know if you guys can see that.
We can. We can.
Can? You can. Great. All right. Cool.
Yes.
Okay. So, hi everyone. My name's Todd Wilson. I'm from Australia. If you haven't worked that out by my accent yet, I kind of agreed to this about a month ago when it was like far enough away that I didn't actually think about it. And then when I was chatting to Randall earlier this week, and he let me know I'm up for an hour. So sorry guys, you got me for an hour. Randall, can you be a bit of a timekeeper for me and let me know like when we're kind of getting close?
Yeah. If I can find my phone, I'll do that. Cool.
The other thing I just wanted to say is, I'd love to be there in person. I'm not, but if you feel free to just kind of speak up. I don't know if you raise your hand and Randall can sort of pass on questions or anything like that. But I'm more than happy for people to interrupt and ask questions as we go. If you happy with that?
Hey, that'll work.
Sounds good. Cool. Great. Right. So, what I'm going to do today, I'm going to start off with just a little bit of an introduction, give you a bit of my background, give you a little bit of background about QGIS in case you're kind of coming off the street, you don't even know what you're doing today, what you're here for. But then the bulk of what I'm actually going to show you is I'm going to run actually through with a bit of a live demo. Hopefully Randall's got all the tech jitters out of the way, so it means that if I do a live demo, then that's all kind of sorted, will be nice and clear. And the reason I wanted to do that was, being remote, it's a little bit different. If I was face to face, we could do things a little bit differently. But I think doing it via video conference like this, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to take you through one of my recent projects I've been working on in QGIS and kind of show you a bit about how I've structured that, how I've put it together, and use that as a bit of an exploration for some sort of tips and tricks. And also a bit of a showcase about what's coming your way in QGIS 3.10, which is due out in about 4 hours, I think, if you look at the countdown clock on the website. So that's kind of what we'll do today. Sound good?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So, my name's Nyall Dawson. I'm from an Australian company called North Road, but I'm also one of the QGIS developers. So I'm, I guess, partially responsible for the code that goes into QGIS and working on new versions and new features and bug fixes and all that kind of stuff that basically get rolled up and pushed out to you guys as QGIS users. If you're totally unaware, I don't know if there's any kind of QGIS total newbies out there today. QGIS is like a desktop GIS package or a mapping application, if you call it. In terms of like where it sits with other software, this is kind of my opinion, and obviously I'm kind of biased because I'm quite involved in the project. But in my view, we've got QGIS is basically comparable to the Esri ArcMap software, kind of the main dominant commercial players, and then in that kind of desktop GIS space, you've only really got Mapping Professional is the other piece of software that's used, and really that one's kind of been left by the roadside for too long, and now QGIS has kind of taken the lead. The way I see it is QGIS is basically, if you imagine about 80% of the functionality of ArcGIS you've got available in QGIS, plus you've got an extra 20% that's not possible in ArcGIS. So it's kind of like 80% overlap plus an extra 20%. And if you flip that around and look at it, you could probably say that ArcMap has got about 80% of what QGIS does, plus an extra 20% that QGIS doesn't have available. And I keep meaning to change this slide because I think it would work better as like a Venn diagram. If you kind of imagine that there's that 80% overlap sitting in the middle, where there's common functionality, you can find the same tools in both of them. Then they've got their own like little specialities on either side, where one does something better than the other, and vice versa. So that said, why QGIS? What's the good points about QGIS, and what makes it attractive? Again, this is my view. I've used QGIS a lot. I've been quite heavily involved in it over the last couple of years, and I found that first up, it's really full-featured. It's a lot of power, like a lot of tools you got there, a lot of features, just a lot of things you can do with it. Secondly, I think it's really fast. It's fast to do things, like you run spatial analysis tasks, and it gives you the results quickly. But I guess kind of more importantly, it's also really responsive to use. So as you're kind of doing your day-to-day tasks and you're clicking on a whole lot of buttons, it doesn't do a lot of sort of hangs where you click a button and then you wait for 30 seconds while you do a little hourglass and then sort of responds after that. It's actually like quite nice and responsive, and it means that you can kind of just get on with your work without having to keep sitting there and wait and wait and wait. Again, my view, but I think QGIS makes beautiful cartography, and there's definitely a lot of really nice maps you can see if you look at the different showcases. There's a lot of good books showing some great QGIS maps on Twitter, obviously, as well. People showcase some really beautiful stuff made with it. Another big plus point I see is that it's got really extensive data format support. So basically, you can get almost any data format that you'll find floating around, and a matter of just dragging and dropping, and QGIS will usually be able to just consume that and read it without any kind of stuffing around of converting it into certain formats that it only accept certain ones. It's pretty much throw anything at it and it can read it. And on a similar kind of note, because it's all standards-based, it means it works alongside other applications. So when you're using QGIS, it doesn't have to be like this little kind of closed wall of you do your work in QGIS and that's it. It's all locked up there. It's actually made to work as part of like a bigger kind of ecosystem of geospatial software. So it means you can take the stuff you're doing in QGIS, use it alongside all these other things like GDAL, PostGIS, tools like R, and they all kind of work together. They work nicely. They can all talk the same language. Another really big selling point, in my view, is that QGIS being a kind of ground-up project means that over time it's had a user-driven feature set and interface. So what I mean by that is instead of it being the product of like a kind of committee sitting down and saying, how does this application, how should it work, let's make the decisions for people, it's actually end users who are deciding what goes into it and how it works and refining that over time. So it's end users who decide, actually, this button shouldn't be here or it shouldn't act this certain way. When you click on that, it would be better for day-to-day GIS user workflow if it worked this way, or if you had this tool here and you exposed it this way. So what that actually means is that as a QGIS user, you get a really nice kind of workflow, streamlined processes that have been developed by other users who are in similar kind of situations to yourself. It's also extensible, so it's got exposes almost everything possible to the Python sort of add-ins. So you get there's last count, I think 400, 500, 600 maybe plugins that you can just download and install and add extra tools to QGIS. But you can also, if you're motivated, write your own Python code and basically change it any way you want. It's like there's no kind of walls put up there. We allow people to do anything they want through Python and change QGIS in any way they kind of can imagine. And I guess last but not least is that it's open source. So open source means that anybody can go onto the QGIS website, click through a couple of links and get to the actual program source code and see how it's all put together. They can read how different things work, they can change it, and they can send those changes back to the project for it to be sort of rolled up into the next release. This open source term, it's often equated with being free, so people will see the big attraction of an open source application is it means it doesn't cost anything. You can just get on the website, download it, and anyone can run it. But in my kind of viewpoint, certainly in more recent years, I don't think that is the big selling point in open source at all. In fact, being free is more of a side effect rather than the end goal of open source. And I see it more as open source is attractive because it means that users are in full control of the application. And what I mean by that is if you take a sort of traditional commercial application and you want to, as a paying user of that application, you might have a bug that affects you, and it affects you of like 2 hours extra work a week or so. You could file a bug report with your sales rep or via their support portal or their ideas page or something like that. And then it's kind of just a waiting game. Like you could sit there and you could say, I hope they'll fix it in the next release, but maybe it's not on their roadmap at all. Maybe it's not a priority for them. I might be the only one affected by that or who want to see the application change in some way. You basically have no control over that product or that vendor's roadmap and what they actually want to put into their software. On the flip side, with open source, everyone has full power to be able to do that. So it means you can either be like a software developer like myself, you could get in there, get the source code, edit that source code, and then change it how you want. Or you could fund a developer to do that for you. So if you don't have the software development skills, you could take your money and say, I'm going to pay somebody else to make this change that will change my day-to-day workflow or fix that bug that annoys me every single day, and you actually have the power to do that. So instead of basically sending your money off to a commercial vendor, hoping that they'll do what you need, you can actually direct your time or your resources for the things that directly impact you. So that's what I mean there by users being in full control of the application. My story. So I historically, if you go back, I don't know how many years now, I started my kind of life as a GIS user. So I was a spatial analyst with the Victoria Police in Australia. So I was kind of working in their intelligence division, and we were doing a lot of mapping things, basically sort of revolving around crime prediction. So we'd take kind of the past patterns of crime, and then we'd run these different forecasting models over it, and basically try and come up with things like optimize their patrols and such. So you could say, in this area, you're getting hit by whatever residential burglaries. You need to send out the patrols at this time, hit these areas, and then that's going to get you the best sort of bang for buck. So I was doing a lot of that kind of stuff, and at the time, Victoria Police, our sort of official software license was with MapInfo Professional, so we were the MapInfo shop. But unfortunately, like a lot of what we actually wanted to do, we couldn't do in the software in MapInfo. So the software was basically limiting what we wanted to get out of it, and how we wanted to do our analysis and the products we wanted to make. So being a government agency, having government agency budgets, we saw QGIS being free, and that was kind of the big selling point. It was like, oh, well, let's at least get it, put it on a computer that we had the ability to put our own software on, and see if it will help, like see if it will let us do some of these tasks that we don't have other tools to do. So we started doing that, and this was back in the sort of QGIS, I think it was about 1.7 days, 1.8 or something like that. So it's going back a long time. And I'd see things in the software that I really liked. So there was bits where I'd use it and I'd be like, this is great. Like I really wanted to be able to do this in my maps, and previously my software wouldn't allow it, or there just wasn't any options for it. But at the same time, there were a lot of bugs. So I'd be doing something, and then I'd all of a sudden hit a roadblock, like a block where I'd be like, hey, this button's not working where it's supposed to. I'm clicking on it, and it's not giving me the answer that it should, or something like that. And so after a little bit of using it as an end user and getting frustrated with these things, of being kind of stuck in a situation where it's like, I want to use it because it's got all this stuff that I really want to be able to use and make my maps look better because of it. But at the same token, there's certain bugs were just blocking that. I had some previous coding experience, not anything super professional, but kind of just hobby coding. And so one day I kind of just took the step of like, oh, well, I'm going to just see, like, nobody else is fixing this particular bug. I want to see if I can get in there and actually work out what's happening and see if I can solve it for myself. And so I did that. I downloaded the source code and I started stuffing around with it to see if I could work out the bit where the bug was and how to fix it. At the time, there was, or there still is, another QGIS developer in Australia called Nathan Woodrow, who you may have kind of bumped into on Twitter or on the different communities. And I got in contact with Nathan. He was fantastic and he would give me heaps of pointers. So I keep sending him emails of like, oh, I tried to do it this way and it didn't work and I don't even know where to look to fix this. He'd send me back little hints of like, have a look at this piece of code here, this bit's, you're on the right track, but you got to do this and this and this. And over time, I kind of got to the stage where actually I could start making contributions and sending in these little bug fixes and that kind of stuff. And I basically do it like on the train home at night. So I work all day for the police using QGIS as an end user, and then sit on the train at night with my laptop. And I kind of had this little pattern going where I'd sort of think back on the day of like, hey, what was like the most annoying things about my day in terms of using this program, and can I fix it before I get home, like on the train? So I kind of hack away like that, and then send the changes back up to the project. And kind of over time, like I started doing a bit more and more of that. When I'd been doing for about a year, I actually got invited to become like what they call like a core developer in the project, where it means that they basically said, yeah, you've been here for long enough that we trust you that you're not going to, I don't know, delete everything on us. So you kind of get permission to actually make changes directly. So I was doing that and just kind of adding bits that I wanted, fixing bugs that were affecting me and that kind of stuff. After I'd been doing that for a couple of years, I started getting these emails from people where I'd make a change and send it into the project, and then maybe 24 hours later, I'd get an email from someone, and it would be like, "Oh, I saw last night you added this thing to QGIS, or you changed this. How much would it cost if we wanted you to just take a little bit further and also address our needs with this same kind of feature?" And I remember getting my first email like that. It was from a European company, and I'd kind of never been exposed to that side of open source before. Like I'd always sort of equated open source as free, as everybody just does it for free and volunteers, and it's kind of like a big sort of, I don't know, socialist, happy family, something or other. And so I got this email and I was kind of just like, I don't even know how to reply to this. Like, if I reply to this email and say, yeah, I'll do it if you pay me, does that mean like I'm going to send that email off, I'm going to come and check my email next day in the morning and I'm going to be kicked out of the project, everybody's going to be hating on me because I wanted to charge for work on open source? Is it like such a big faux pas that if I go down that track, like I'll just be kicked out of the community, basically blacklisted? And so I sat there and I was just like thinking for ages, like, how do I even respond to this? And I was like, how much do I charge for it? Like, if it's just a hobby for me, what am I supposed to, how am I supposed to even give them a price? So I kind of like puzzled over it for ages, and then in the end I replied and I was like, look, I'll do it for $200. And I was like, oh, he's probably going to turn around and just say, what the heck are you thinking? That's way too much. I was thinking it would be like $20 or something. And so I sent it off. He was a European. It was a European company. And when I went to bed, came back the next day, checked my email, and I had a reply from him, and it was basically like, are you sure that number's right? I think you might want to rerun your figures. And I was like, that doesn't help me. I don't know what you mean by that. Does it mean that you only expected to pay $20, or does it mean that I ridiculously underquoted and that's the reason you're kind of questioning this? For reference, if I was doing the same job now and somebody asked me for a quote on a similar project of that same kind of magnitude, I'd quote about €20,000 for the work. So 20,000 euro at the time, I was like questioning €200 of like, they're going to kick out of the project for doing this. But in the end, so I did it. I did it for the €200, and I kind of busted my gut at night and on the weekends for a good, 4 weeks or something like that to get the work done. And I quickly learned, like a few experiences like that, I quickly learned, hey, it's actually okay to charge for your time for something like this. Like, it's not, being involved in an open source project doesn't come with like this big liability of, hey, now you have to give up all your spare time for any request that anybody makes over time and do it all for free and, live with it. It's actually like perfectly fine to charge reasonable amounts for your time and to, balance that with volunteer work as well. And anyway, so over the kind of following couple of years, I started getting more and more of these emails and contract work on QGIS, little feature enhancements and bug fixes and that kind of stuff. And it basically got to a stage where I was balancing my full-time job at the police with working nights and working weekends and on the train home, doing these QGIS contracts. And it got to like a point where I was like, I got to make a decision. Do I keep trying to squash 2 full-time jobs into my shrinking amount of time and have a young family, or do I just take a chance and drop my stable government job and try and make a go of doing this kind of open source thing full-time as a profession? And kind of long story short, we took the chance, and that was, 4 or 5 years ago now, and it's been good since. So the reason I kind of want to give you all that background is because I'm a GIS user who's become a developer. I'm not a software developer who's come into the spatial game as just an outsider, if you want to say. I still have this hat on my head of like, how does a GIS user think? Like, how does a GIS analyst, a typical desktop user, actually expect this button to work, or how do they expect this feature to work? And in a good week, I still actually get to make maps. So I'll still, like, any job that comes along where I actually get to make a map and use the software to make something nice, I'll jump on it, because I really don't want to lose that touch with that side of myself as well. That's what sort of drew me into this whole spatial game in the first place. And I still love actually making maps. So I've got 2 hats. I've got this like QGIS developer hat on, but I've also got I just want to make pretty maps, and I want to help other people make pretty maps as well, hat on at the same time, kind of balancing the 2. Right, that's where I'm coming from. Now today, I am going to show you one of the projects that I've been working on over the last, month or so, I guess. A mapping project. But I'm basically taking this one as just an excuse to run through some of the things that I think are cool in QGIS about how to make maps, how to style them, and how to kind of work as a project. And I'll also show you some of the frequent 10 features that are coming really soon. Any questions before I get started?
Nope. Go for it.
No, go for it. Right. I'm looking at half of a sort of projector screen here, but I can hear Randall's voice, so that's good. Right. Good. Yeah. Hey Randall, I feel ripped off that I'm not going to get one of your selfie pics.
Well, I kind of did one at the screen, but yeah, it wasn't. We'll figure something out.
Yeah, I'll have to make it. I'll have to make a trip over. I think you guys have got the coolest conferences, like the NACIS. Is it NACIS? NACIS?
Yeah. NACIS was last week, I think NACIS was last week. Yeah,
it was. Well, I mean, I just see all the stuff come out on Twitter, and I see these awesome sounding talks. I'm like, man, you guys. Yeah. Anyway. Right. Here's my. Can you all see this? This is QGIS.
Yep.
Oh, that's 3.8. What am I doing? I was looking for 3.9. So 3.9 is the kind of beta release of 3.10, and like I said, 3.10 is going to be out in about 3 hours now. So it'll be coming out really shortly. Still takes a while to load. Still takes a while to load. Especially when you're doing live demos. All right, here we go, demo map. Okay, here we go. So, let me zoom right out here. And find my notes. Here we go. So this map, or this project that I'm working on, is basically like a print map for a series of print maps for a physical report that was being produced by an agency over here. I've had to strip out everything that's kind of like specific about it. So it's like this project is now kind of the background maps, and it doesn't actually have the theme sitting on top of it, but you'll have to just excuse me for that. Right, so the first thing that we're looking at, super simple. This is me building up a little overview map that's going to sit in the corner of my the print map. So it's going to be like a locator and show that the extent of the main map here. So what we have on screen at the moment is basically like a polygon layer showing me Queensland. Queensland is a state in Australia where I live. So we've just got that one state floating here. But even in this simple little layout, we've got a few little tricks here that I've done that I want to kind of run through review as a starting point. So the very first thing I want to show is in my polygon layer here, I've styled it using just a simple fill. So we've got a simple fill with a kind of blue color interior and a whitish sort of stroke around the outside. But to make it look a bit nicer and a little bit kind of pop a bit more, hopefully you can see it on your screens there, but I've added a little drop shadow in the background here. And the way that's actually done in QGIS is using this layer styling panel over here. So you can get to that with the paintbrush icon up on the top left here. So I select my layer, I bring up this layer styling panel. That brings me all the options to actually style that layer. What I'm going to do is I'm going to look at this little section down the bottom here called layer rendering. And there's an option here that's usually unticked, but it says draw effects. So when I tick that on, I can get into all its settings with a little button over here on the right that looks like a kind of yellow star. And this unlocks a whole bunch of extra impact sort of effects that you can do on your layers. So what I did in my project here is I turned on this effect called a drop shadow. And if I turn this on and off, you'll see the difference that makes. So the drop shadow is basically just like a kind of fake shadow effect there that sits below that polygon layer. You've got a whole lot of settings here about how the colour of the shadow and the distance of it and the kind of the opacity of it and whatnot. But the cool thing is that these effects are all live. So if I went in here and I started actually editing this layer, let's say I use this node tool and start moving bits of Queensland around, you can see that the shadow's being drawn on the fly. So it's not like something that we've had to generate in advance and say, let me make a raster layer that will sit in the background that shows the shadow. It's actually just being drawn as part of that polygon. So our simple polygon layer has got that drop shadow that's going to give it a little bit more impact when we actually put it onto the map. The other thing I wanted to show you here is something that I keep coming back to when I'm trying to make a map that looks really, really nice. I guess it's kind of like one of my pet peeves at the moment, is I love to just simplify line work. What I mean by that is a lot of kind of GIS maps you'll see will look a bit like this, where somebody's taken this sort of the data that you get from your government portal or your download in the raw form, in its full sort of original quality. You can see here there's lots of these little islands and stuff. The coastline's super detailed, and they'll use that at like a scale where it'll sit in the corner here, maybe a couple of centimeters tall. But there's just way too much detail in that layer for the scale that it's going to be shown at. So by simplifying it, we get something that's much more visually pleasing. We don't have all that extra little detail that's just not needed for a locator map that's going to sit down in the bottom corner at quite a small scale. So to actually do that, the process I go through is to use the processing toolbox. If you've never seen this before, this is where a whole lot of the power of QGIS sits, is when you go to this processing toolbox, you get a little panel open here on the right, where you've got a ton of different tools here. You can see there's all things about vector geometry, where you've got things like your buffers and your centroid tools, and things in here for doing your clips and your intersections and that kind of day-to-day GIS stuff. But there's literally there's thousands of tools that get exposed through this toolbox, and some of them get kind of super esoteric. So something like, where's a good one? I like this one here. So pole of inaccessibility. So this one, if you double click and you see the help, it says here, calculates the pole of inaccessibility for a polygon, which is the most distant internal point from the boundary of the surface. So this one here, it actually works out the point inside this feature that's got the biggest closest distance to the outside of that polygon. So it's kind of like, it's a little bit like a centroid, but instead a centroid might end up sitting right near your boundary, or it might actually sit outside your feature. This thing is always like the one where it's got the biggest distance. So something like that, you might use it once a week, you might use it once a month, you might use it once a year, but the fact that it's just there and you can run it with a few clicks of the mouse, super convenient. So in this processing toolbox, if we scroll through here, there is an algorithm here called Simplify, and that's the one that I used to take my original data from the government and chop it right back down to some super kind of simplified, generalized outlines here like that. Right. Let's go back to this one. The other thing that I just want to show up front in this project is whenever I'm starting a new project in QGIS, there's a few things that I'll do as like kind of homework step or housework step, sorry, before I even start throwing layers into the map. One of those things that I'll do is I'll tend to go into my project properties here, and under the styles tab here, we've got this option down here for project colors. So So this project colors basically lets me make a color scheme for the project that I'm going to work on. So in this one here, I've added 4 different colors. I've got one called base, one called base outside, which is kind of like the outline of the base features, I guess. I've added one called ocean, and I've also made one here called highlight. But I can add as many colors here as I want just by hitting this plus button over here on the outside, and using this color picker. Let's get like a kind of an orangey one here, and we can give them a name. So I could call this, whatever, burnt orange or something like that. But I prefer to actually give them like names which are a bit more descriptive of what they'll be used for. So this one might be like standout features, let's say. Right. So I'll set up a whole bunch of colors like this that kind of give me a color scheme for my project. Then when I'm going through here and I'm adding in like a polygon layer like this simple one here, if I go to my symbol properties over on the right here, in recent versions of QGIS, so I think 3.6 and above or 3.8 and above, what we can actually do here is we can grab this little button that sits next to any of these colors and say, this color here I want to take, so I'm clicking on this, there's an option here that says color, and I can actually say, I want to fill these polygons using the color from my project, and I want it to be this, let's say, my base highlight color. And over here I've already done it, but I've set this stroke to be the base color from my project. And you see, it makes a few little changes here. For instance, it's changed this icon. Might be hard to see on the screen, but it's now like a kind of chain icon to say it's now linked. And if I hover over this, I can see that this color is now linked to base highlight, and this one's linked to base. And I actually can't change these anymore. So if I click on there, I don't have the usual option to change that color. But the really cool thing is that now I've got a single place where I can change a whole bunch of colors in my project. So if I go back into my project properties and I decide, 2 weeks down the track when I've got 50 layers in my project, that actually that blue is not quite right, and I made a bad choice when I started my project, and it should have been, I don't know, maybe it should have been a little bit more like this. I can change it in this one place in project properties, and when I do this, it actually just goes through and all the places where I've linked that color get updated at once. So instead of having to go through 50 different layers and say, change this color, change the fill of this one, change the outline of this one, change the label color of this one, and update them all, and then be like, actually, no, that was a mistake. I should have left it how it was, and go and undo all those changes. You can just change it in one single place, and you can see the effects flow on all the way through your project. So that can kind of apply to symbols. You can do it for labels as well. Like if I added a label for this layer, I could say, get my color for this from this base color as well, massive. And then when I change that color, we'll see, if I change base, let's make it something gross. All the places where I've used that base color now change simultaneously. So it's really like, you'd set it up once in advance and it will save you a heap of time in the long run. Let's change that back because that's super ugly now. Can I get back to what it was? Something like that, I think. Right. That one off. Okay. Now, the other thing I wanted to show on this as well is whenever I'm setting up labeling on a new project as well, there's a couple of things I think in QGIS for labels when you're making a nice map that you want to look awesome, that you just kind of got to burn into your muscle memory. So one of these is if I go into this layer here and I turn on labels for this one, QGIS loves going back to this font, this MS Shell Dialog 2 font. Right, so every time you add a new layer and you turn on labels, on Windows at least, it'll jump back to this font. And the problem is this font here is just like a super ugly font. It looks pretty bad on screen, but it looks even worse when you make a PDF where you print out that map. So a really useful thing, get it into your muscle memory that every time you turn on labels for a layer in QGIS, you go in here and you pick a nicer font. You know, if you don't know fonts, just go for something like Calibri is kind of like a good, safe fallback. Much better than that MS Shell Dialog one. So basically, like, turn on labels, change the font. Turn on labels, change the font. That's kind of like one of my biggest tips with making pretty maps in QGIS is change that default font straight away. Right, I'm just going to turn that one off for now. Looking through my notes, sorry, I've just got to work out the next logical bit to go from here. All right, in terms of managing this project and making things simple for myself going forward in the future, I'd encourage you to become familiar with QGIS's Style Manager. So this button up here that we've got that says Style Manager brings up my symbol library. So my symbol library is a whole bunch of polygon and line and point symbols, which have been saved as presets inside here. On a new QGIS install, you get a bunch of ones by default that look more or less like this. But this is up to you to customize and to start extending. So basically what I would do is, if I get a symbol like this, and I'm pretty happy with this, I think it looks all right, the kind of white outline of the drop shadow looks nice. I can go into here in my symbol styles and I can click Save Symbol, add this one to my symbol library so that it'll always be accessible for when I make new projects, and I can just pull that symbol back and reuse it again in future. So I could call this like blue fill with shadow. And if I click save there, so now my blue fill with shadow is one of the symbols that I can just jump straight back to. So if I go and I look through here and I say, let's try this one in, this one, no, that's not what I want, let's go back to that. It's kind of like a one click to get back to that symbol. This thing here has been in QGIS for, I don't know, as long as I've been using it. But a really cool thing that's been added in QGIS 3.10, so the one that's coming out in about 2.5 hours, is that you can also manage text formats and labels in here as well now. So if I go in and I make a labeling style that I really like, let's say something like this, we'll put on, I don't know, put a drop shadow on that one too. Just make something a bit more interesting here than we had before. So I make something like this and I'm kind of happy with it. I can actually go in here now and I can save those label settings as well. So if I go save here, and I could call this blue box with label. And now I've got a text format that I can jump back to and I can reuse across that project, or I can use in other projects when I'm happy with how that particular labeling setting looks. So if I go back up into my style manager here now and look at this label settings tab, I've got my blue box of label ready to go for future projects. I can also export that and share with other people as well if I want. So that's one of the cool new things that's coming in QGIS 3.10. All right, now another thing that I come back to all the time in my QGIS projects is this concept in QGIS of map themes. So if you've come from a a kind of Esri background, you'll be familiar with the fact that in Esri projects, you can have multiple data frames in a single project. That's kind of like where you have one data frame sits here, it's got its own set of layers that are styled in a certain way. And you can have multiple data frames that you can switch between and have one showing at a particular time that's got a different configuration of layers. QGIS has a similar kind of thing, but it kind of approaches it in a little bit of a different way. In terms of, in QGIS land, the same end goal is exposed through this thing called map themes. And map themes are all done through this little icon that sits on my toolbar here. That says Manage Map Themes when I hover over that. So in my project here, when I click this one, I've got three different themes here. So I've got one here that's called my Queensland Overview. When I click on this one, it's actually the thing that we're looking at the moment, so not much changes there. But you can see at the moment I've got my Queensland layer ticked and a whole bunch of other layers that are not checked at the moment, they're invisible. But if I go to one of my other themes here, like my regional overview theme, what it's done is it's changed, it's taken my QGIS across to where I save that theme, where I've got a different set of layers checked. So now we've got like all these populated places checked and watercourses and a whole bunch of other things. And as I switch between these, you can see that one's got a certain set of layers checked. This theme here has got a different set of layers checked, and my regional overview has got a third different set of layers checked. So you can basically have your own combination of any of these layers that you want shown for a particular theme. And you can also include in there, optionally, if you want them, how they're styled. So you can have different themes, might have the same layer but styled in a different way. And I can just make as many themes as I want within that project that let me flip between them via this button up here. So my Queensland overview is made for a map that's going to sit down there in the bottom corner at a really small scale. My regional overview is going to be kind of the guts of my map, and it's made for a large scale viewing a small area of that country, of that state. This is actually a really good opportunity now to show another cool thing that's come in QGIS 3.10, and that's the fact that this concept of like spatial bookmarks in a project has been basically ripped apart and overhauled for 3.10. So now it's all done through the QGIS browser panel. When we go to this browser tab, there's a new option here called Spatial Bookmarks. And if I look at my project bookmarks, in this project I've got 3 different bookmarks of different areas of interest that I can kind of jump between. And I can easily add new ones by kind of zooming into an area, and where's this button up here to make a new bookmark. I can do it in there, save it in the project, and populate this with a whole bunch of different bookmarks specific to that project that I can jump between. This bookmark functionality has been in QGIS for quite a while, but the actual interface for using it and the workflow was quite clunky and not very user friendly. So 3.10 basically brings that overhaul where it pulls it all into this browser. So you've got everything sitting in a nice tree here, and it's super easy to go in there and edit those bookmarks and kind of rename them and rearrange them and such. But I was going to go to my area of interest 1. Right, so this is my kind of the main theme of this map that we're going to show is my regional overview theme. If I take this one, actually, Randall, how long have I got?
15 minutes or so.
15 minutes? All right, cool. 15 minutes is good. I'm going to take this one from the bottom up, and I'm just going to show you some of the things that I've used to kind of craft this map. So let's turn off a whole bunch of layers. I'm going to go hide all layers and just turn on a few of these ones to start with, like so. All right, so the first thing I want to show you in this map is the layer here that I've called my water effect layer. And this one's using a kind of funny technique. So if I go back, building this theme up from the bottom, I've got one layer here that's a polygon layer called background, and it's just styled using a blue fill. So that's kind of just the background on that, the base color. On top of that, I've got this one called water effect. And water effect is giving me a kind of shading effect that goes around the coastline of the state here. This one is a bit tricky because if I change this style back to something simple, let's just go one of these ones. We'll see. This is actually just my state layer again. So it's the same layer that I've used in the other map theme to show my state of Queensland. And it actually is the interior. So this layer here contains the state, so it's the polygon of the state. But I used a little trick in QGIS symbology where I've changed the way this layer is rendered from doing the single symbol up here, change it to this option that's called Inverted Polygons. And you can see there, when I change it between single symbol and inverted polygons, it changes from colouring in the bits inside those polygons, flips it around, and actually starts shading in all the bits outside there. So if I take this back to how I had it before, and where's my bookmark? Right, so this is using that inverted polygon effect. And what I've done here is I've actually styled it using something called this a fill symbol type called a shape burst fill. So this shape burst fill is actually like a gradient that kind of starts at the edge of a polygon and changes its color as it moves towards the center. But because I'm inverting it, it's actually starting at the outside of my state and slowly fading off into the water. So I've got it going between a sort of dark blue color here into a totally transparent color, and you can see that's how we're getting this nice kind of shading effect. If I change it to something super ugly like this, it makes a bit more sense because we can see here my shape burst is actually taking this kind of color ramp, going from red to yellow to blue as it gets further away from the edge of that polygon feature. In this case, let's pull it back to the subtle one. There we go. Which I've lost now. Let's revert my project back to the previous one because I want it to look like how I did before. And that is what's giving us this kind of nice coastal effect here where the water sort of bleeds out, getting darker as we go. I've also used this same effect elsewhere here. So you can see, I don't know if it shows up well on the projector there, but we've got a layer here where the kind of area outside of our area of interest starts off as a dark grey sort of colour and it's blending away into a lighter grey there. And that's also using a shape burst fill, so going from a dark sort of brown colour to a lighter brown to get this nice effect where we sort of subtly just like highlight the area that we're interested in and make the rest fade off. But like looks nice and smooth. A little tip with this, if you're using these shape burst fills, let's go to this one. There's an option here called blur strength, and if I pull this right down, so by default it starts at 0, and it gives you, let's make this a bit darker so we can see it. It kind of gives you this, it looks a bit jagged, the effect, like it's sort of like, I don't know, spiny or spiky or something like that. But when you crank up this blur to sort of halfway, that's when it starts looking super smooth and it looks like nice and polished. And you're like, yeah, like I mean, you know, like a professional cartography product. There's my, that's kind of my base layers here that I've got in my project. Another technique I've used here in this particular project here is, where have we got it? This one. So I have a layer here called sub-basin labels, and if I turn this one on and off, you'll see there's like a label here that kind of shows and disappears, and some of these other ones, the italic ones, are part of that layer. So this one here is a polygon layer, but we don't actually want to show any of the polygon objects inside this layer. All we want to do is show it as labels. And the way I've done that is I've set up my labeling here with the way I want this layer to look. And then I've gone back up to my symbology tab and I've changed it from that sort of standard single symbol renderer that QGIS uses to the top option of actually, I don't even want symbols for this layer. I want it to be totally transparent, don't shade anything in for these features. All I'm going to be doing is showing the labels for them. So like a lot of people will go in here if they want this kind of effect, and they'll go here and they might say, I'll make this fully transparent and get rid of this line. That's kind of the long way around. If all we're after is hiding the features itself, you can just do it simply by going to no symbols, and then we've got no symbols. We've just got our labels. Right. Another little tool that you got in QGIS, which is less frequently known but is super, super useful, is down in the status bar here. There's you get your mouse coordinate widget, you've got your scale setting here. Next to it, you've got this one here called Magnifier. And if I'm working on any kind of project that I want to look like super nice, like it's going out to a report or something like that, I'll be using this magnifier all the time, because this one actually lets me take the map at this particular scale, so at whatever this is, about 500,000, and get a closer view of it. So instead of changing the scale of my map, that stayed the same, it's actually just magnifying all the way that's drawn. So it's like you're taking that printed sheet of paper at 1 to 500,000 and just pulling it close to your eyes. So you can start to see more of the detail in this, versus just changing the scale where everything stays the same size, but you're changing the map scale. So that's not actually making these lines any thicker, it's just changing the scale of my map. Versus magnifier, where everything stays the same scale, but I'm getting closer view, my lines get thicker, I can get in there and I can see like the really fine detail, and maybe I might move a label 0.5 millimeter and I can start doing that kind of stuff in this at a super magnified view. So that one I'll use heaps of times. Okay, there's two things that I want to show you in terms of, there's some great new labeling features that have come in QGIS 3.10. So aside from that ability to store label settings inside my style manager, something that I've used in this project is some of the other new labeling features. So one that was quite useful for this particular project, if I go back to this, and let's zoom in here, I think we'll be able to see. Let's go a bit closer. So in 3.10, we've got a new option for line labels of this overrun setting. So this overrun setting actually lets me control if I want my labels to be allowed to go past the edge of features. So in this case, if I say, no, I don't, let's put that back to no, there's not enough room in this road here to fit that labeling. But as I crank it up and I say, actually, you can go up to 5 millimeters past the edge, now it's got more flexibility and it's actually saying, yep, now I've got enough space to fit that label in. And basically the end result is that you can mess around with this setting, push it up as far as you think you can get away with, and you'll get more labels on your map by default. So, the more labels you get on your map tends to be, well, the more labels you get automatically on the map, it's like less work for you. It just means that you can get that map out quicker. So that's a cool new feature that comes in 3.10. The other really cool feature in terms of labeling that comes in 3.10, and like in full honesty, QGIS is a little bit behind here because a lot of the other mapping applications have had this for quite a while. But QGIS 3.10 brings native support for label callouts. So in this case, for my place names layer here, you can see this feature here has had the label moved. Where is it? So this label here has been moved away from its standard position that would sit down actually near this point. And we've got this nice call out line that's being shown there. And that's thanks to this new label setting for callouts. So as I kind of move this label around now, you can see that call out is automatically getting updated to point to, beta release, pointing to where that label actually sits, joining those two. And you get heaps of options in here because you can go in here and you can customize this line style in any way you want. So you could say, let's do my call outs in a kind of red dotty thing, kind of way, or in a cat trail, maybe, I don't know, pointing arrow. Let's make some ugly maps, yeah. But there's like tons of flexibility. So you can make some super ugly maps, but you could also use this and make something that looks, really quite nice. And getting, pushing it as far as you want, basically. So we could tweak this a bit and say, let's make them a little bit shorter, and start getting some really nice looking labels on our map here. You're gonna cut me off, aren't you?
We're almost at the end.
All right, 2 more minutes. Can I have 2 more minutes?
Okay.
Yes. All right, because I wanted to quickly show you my layouts for this one. So if in my print layout section here, this is kind of the end result. So this is why I'd like to show you this. So my layout here, when it catches up, is pretty simple. Come on, QGIS. So we've got our little locator map is sitting in the bottom left corner there. And our main regional map takes up the rest of the page. The way this is done in QGIS, so I've basically drawn 2 map items here. So I've got one that was drawn like this. And over in the item properties over here, I just make sure that this setting that says follow map theme is set to, this one is my Queensland Overview. Let's zoom that one out a bit. So that's giving me that style that I've set up previously with the blue and the drop shadow, which is exactly what's been done here. And my main map is set to follow my regional overview theme. So that's the kind of the main guts of that map is being shown now. I'll leave you with this little tip for working with maps in the QGIS layout, is a lot of people go in here and they get super frustrated by QGIS print layout because they'll try and they'll be wanting to tweak the actual part of this map that's shown, and they'll go into this setting and they'll try and stuff around with these numbers to change the extent, and people's brains just don't work this way of saying, I need to move this left, so what's my new extent? Don't use that. Like that's a horrible way of doing it. Much easier is when you highlight this map, there's this toolbar across the top here gives me options for tweaking what this kind of window of my map is actually pointing to. And the second last icon here is this one that's called Interactively Edit Map Extent. So when I highlight my map and I click this one, now I can just pick up this map and drag and drop it in that frame to set it to exactly the extent that I want. So I don't have to stuff around with these numbers at all. I can do it all visually. And I can even use my mouse scroll wheel to zoom in and out of that map. This project takes a little while to redraw, but I can now just tweak this. Don't have to stuff around with these numbers. Never stuff around with those numbers. And yeah, get it exactly how I want. So I could like, yeah, right there. That's how that's supposed to be. Done. Like that. Cool. Any questions?
That's pretty awesome.
Hey, Randall?
Yeah.
I got a question for him as a developer.
Okay. Question coming in?
So, Esri, of course, has all these pretty logos, like little house shapes and symbology. QGIS is very woeful on. Is anybody developing on those kind of things? I know we got some packs, but not a very extensive pack.
Yeah, so the question was, I don't know if you heard it or not, that Esri's pretty feature rich as far as like symbology and icons. Is anyone actively developing more icon sets for QGIS or?
Look, I don't. There are people who have published symbol sets, so their own symbol libraries. But to be honest, my advice is if you're looking for icons to use on your map, go to the Noun project. So Noun project is a website. I guess it's like a massive clip art library, but it's clip art that works super well for maps. Like if I look in here for something like power station, there's a ton of icons that you can get from here. And actually a lot of them are either Creative Commons or public domain, so you might be able to just get them for free and use them in your map straight away. But otherwise, if you sign up to this, it's like $30 a year, so it's kind of like a pittance. They all become sort of public domain for you, so it means you can just put them in your map. You don't have to accredit anyone, have like all this sort of attribution text down the bottom of your map, and you can legally just use these ones. So this is what I tend to do, is I would go to Noun project, I'd search for something, and if I like this one, for instance, I'd grab that as an SVG, and then I'd put this into my project as like an SVG, where are we? I'd put it in as an SVG marker in my project.
Now, once you buy them, can you put them in the save styles and save them, or is it just on your computer?
Like what's
No, you definitely can. And in more recent QGIS versions, there's actually an option here. It's funny, I don't know why that's like that. When you do like an SVG marker, or if you've got a raster image marker, or any of these ones that kind of use an external file, you can actually drop down this button here and say embed file. So then I could pick out my SVG, and instead of then having to make sure that SVG doesn't get moved and also, is always sort of supplied to that project, it actually just embeds the content directly into that project. So it's still self-contained. You don't have to worry about this silly little SVG sitting around separately. It's sort of part of that symbol then. So if I embedded it, then I save that symbol into my symbol collection, then the SVG or the image or whatever will be sitting inside there. I can share that with someone else. It'll just work as you kind of hope.
Cool. Any other questions? Oh, another one?
Yeah, just a general question about QGIS. When running processing tools, I'm kind of wondering why it gives you the user-generated coordinate reference system versus switching to the project. I don't know if that's changed with 3.10 or if anybody else has an answer or has that same problem, but I always have, that user-generated CRS whenever I'm running processing tools and it's not spitting out to my project set EPSG.
Usually when you run them, it'll inherit the CRS of your input layer. So if I run like a buffer and I do it on a layer that's, these are all geographic, but if I ran it on one of these, the output of this should be in EPSG 4283. So it kind of like follows on from a layer to the input layer. So not the project CRS, but actually the source CRS.
Right.
It gets a little bit more tricky when you have something like, like a clip, I guess, where you've got multiple layers, multiple source layers. So in this case, it depends on the algorithm which one it will actually inherit. But for instance, with clip, it'll take the input layer's CRS and then reproject the second layer to match to do that clip, and then the output will still be in this 4283. That's the case with all these ones which have got a kind of Q icon. The ones where it's like an external tool, so GDAL or GRASS or Saga, for instance, it's different rules. So definitely, like if you run a Saga tool or a GRASS tool, then yeah, you might get a different kind of CRS output than what you pulled in, and in that case, it might go to like a user one if it's I don't know, depending on what the source is.
Thank you. Yeah, that answers the question. I'm using some of those other tools, and I think that's what's causing it. I mean, I just have to go in and change it to whatever I want, but it works. I was just wondering. Thank you.
Yeah, on that note, so QGIS, right, uses a whole lot of libraries underneath it to do bits and pieces of GIS stuff. So one of those libraries that it uses underneath the hood is the Proj library. So Proj is like a projection, CRS, transformation library. That library did a massive rework over the last 12 months. And it's kind of like rewritten the whole CRS handling inside QGIS or inside Proj, and that means that it's following through to all those kind of open source projects which use Proj. So GDAL, GRASS, all these kind of ones that got Proj underneath the hood will start getting this hugely improved transformation capabilities and much more robust sort of parsing of CRS definitions and such. So I think you'll see this situation get a whole lot better over the next coming releases, and definitely starting in 3.10 and onwards.
Doug had a, yep.
You got GRASS and Saga embedded with QGIS. I heard some talk about also embedding Orfeo Toolbox. Is that coming in 3.10 as well?
Yeah, that is. So Orfeo Toolbox is a little bit of a different case in that it kind of gets the framework pushed out with QGIS, but you still need to get the Orfeo Toolbox binaries from somewhere. And the easiest way is actually to get it from, where is it? I thought it was here, but maybe it's under experimental. Oh no, got Premier Live. Maybe I just have to activate it here. But you need to install Orfeo Toolbox separately. So that doesn't come as part of the sort of default QGIS install. You got to install it separately. Then go in here and activate that Orfeo Toolbox provider. Sorry, I went to this little spanner icon here in the Toolbox. Activate that Orfeo Toolbox provider, and also point it across here to tell it where I've installed it to. So there's a few kind of manual steps that you have to do, and that's because it's just not packaged with that default QGIS install.
Cool. Anybody else? Fear? Questions? How's the weather in Australia currently?
Where I'm from, it's beautiful. I'm from Sunshine Coast, and here Sunshine Coast is kind of like winter is like, if it gets below 25, everybody is chuck on your hoodie and light fires because we're freezing. And then I don't know, we're lucky. We get lots of rain, we get lots of sun. Yeah.
He's doing Celsius.
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah, that is Celsius for the Fahrenheit crowd, so 25 Celsius. Yeah, we're all.
Yeah, I saw you ranting on Twitter a while ago, Randall, about units and QGIS and millimeters and print layout.
Where's me now? Man, so everybody, Nyall, you rock, man. I appreciate. Like, I will be emailing you shortly with much thanks and much everything else for doing this. So.
Well, I mean, I'm pretty passionate about this project. Like, I've been involved in it since I don't know, the last 8 years or something.
Yeah.
But I just really like it. Like, I like the software, but I guess more importantly, like, I think the community is fantastic. Like, it's a really welcoming community. If you kind of raise your hand to say, like, I want to get involved, you'll find people will just jump on you and in a good way. And if you say, like, hey, look, I need help with this, can someone mentor me? You'll get offers for people who want to assist and sort of bring you into that community and help you out. And I actually found that, like, this was getting involved in the QGIS community was probably one of the best things I ever did in terms of my knowledge about GIS and kind of spatial processing and that, because just getting outside of the little bubble of my 9-to-5 job, and getting involved in that bigger kind of user group network, you just get exposed to so much more inspiration, what other people are doing, kind of like cutting edge practice, and just people who are willing to share tips and skill you up, and you just like, you level up like multiple levels really quickly. So I don't know, I love being in this game. So thanks for having me, Randall.
No, man, thanks for doing it, because man, so with that, we're already probably behind where we should be, but hey, it was worth it. So,
sorry.
No, man, dude.
We'll blame Zoom and
oh man, like we got in here, the AV guy came in, the audiovisual guy came in. It was just kind of like, hey, you're on your own. Good luck. Wow. Okay. Thanks. So
nice.
Awesome, man.
Well, I hope the rest of the event goes well, and I'd love to be there in person one day.
Yeah, hopefully, and good luck on your next 2-hour release of 310.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
All right, cheers. Thank you, everyone.
All right, see you later. Thanks.